Welcome to the Kids with Big Emotions podcast. I am beyond excited today to have Allie with me today, who is with Oxford Learning, because one of the biggest struggles when I had to pull my son from school, I had to figure out on my own. Why is this kid really struggling when he's academically ahead, but he can't show his work? And we've got the outbursts and the emotions. And a lot of what Allie has learned in blending everything with her, Oxford Learning, and all that they do with their students as well, is blending all of this together. So I'm so excited to have this conversation with you today, Allie. So before we get started diving into all of that, can you tell everybody all about yourself, what it is that you do, and how you got into doing this?
Yeah, so I've two names too. So lots of friends call me Allie, and how depending on how I met you, and then a lot of kids at the center call me Allison. So I go by both. So if people are referencing and they hear it, they'll be like, "Oh, which person?" So I have my early childhood education background. I have a degree in child psych, master's in child psych, and I kind of fell into Oxford when I didn't want to be teaching in the schools after I had been teaching English in Japan. So I've worked with kids in different countries and just seeing those different school systems. And then kind of just eventually purchased the Oxford from the former owner that I had worked for. So I have been at Oxford now for almost 19 years. I've owned it for almost 14. So I have quite a lot of experience just dealing with both the school systems and sort of the alternative system and being able to see what works for kids. So that's been a huge component of kind of how it got me here.
Can we talk about these kids? Like, what are parents saying to you? What do you hear quite a lot from parents that they're saying that in the school system they're struggling and how they're asking for help from you?
Yeah, so a lot of times I think parents don't know why. And teachers in the classroom are doing what they can. They're doing what they can with what they are given. Resources are limited. The pandemic affected everybody in different ways. And so you've got class sizes, you've got a curriculum that moves. It just moves, whether the kids are ready to move with it or not. And that then creates a lot of gaps. So then you're bringing in those academic deficiencies with the cognitive side of things. So, how are those kids learning? How are they processing information? Which the schools don't really measure. They don't have the capacity or the skill set to do it. They do know it for some kids because they've gone and spent the money at a psychologist, whereas we do measure that as well at Oxford. So, a lot of the stuff I'm hearing from parents is, behind in a certain grade level, their reading, their phonics, but then you have the executive functioning skills that are also suffering. So they're lacking the independence, they're, the self-regulation, collaboration skills. So kind of all of those, it just depends on who I get the call from. But there is usually some kind of lack that's happening in the moment of the call and is usually triggered by what's perceived as a poor mark on the report card because that's a lot of only what the parents have to go off of. And depending on if you have a really involved teacher that year who might call you in advance to give you a little bit more insight into what they're seeing.
So many things in what you said. The one thing I do want to absolutely have everybody understand is both you and I have so much respect for teachers.
Oh, for sure.
The schools, there's so much, and teachers aren't, they have to work in so many confines and the amount of kids. Like, one reason I did pull my son is I didn't feel that a teacher with 28, 30 kids had to deal with my son's outbursts. I just didn't think that was fair to a teacher. So, and I am grateful I had the ability to bring him home, like, because I know not everybody does. So
Well,
this is
there's the system and then there's teachers, right? So, and I think that that's the big thing is, and,
yes.
and while we worked really hard at Oxford, specifically mine and my colleague who owns Kitchener, is like we work really hard with trying to build the relationship with the teachers because that old adage of it takes a village, it really does take a village. No one child has fallen behind because they've all of a sudden gotten into a classroom with a teacher. That's not how that works, right? It's just like, wait, we didn't all of a sudden gain 30 pounds, so there's differences there. And I think one teacher is not to blame, the teachers are not to blame, but the system is broken and the teachers within it are doing what they can. And us having those relationships with them where we can help them in a different way so that at school they're taking the skills they're using at Oxford and applying them and then closing that gap is typically the goal.
Yes. So you touched on executive functioning a little. Can we dive in a little bit about what that actually looks like?
Sure.
So, because a parent may not understand, and I know I say the word all the time, and I'm learning that not everybody understands what that looks like for a child. So, what could executive functioning struggles look like for a child in their schoolwork and in their behavior?
Yeah, so it's kind of things that how you're using to manage everyday tasks, right? So it could be that memory, it could be cognitive flexibility, and just kind of that inhibition control. So where it comes to, okay, those three kids have been asked to line up, and you have to line up, but it's not, you haven't been called to line up yet, but you know that you have to line up. So that inhibition, you want to go and do it, and so that impulse of you might go and do it, and yes, you are doing the, to quote, right thing, because everyone's eventually going to line up. In that moment, you are not. So in a classroom that needs to have the structure, somebody who may struggle in some ways with that executive functioning, they've maybe memorized or habitualized that they know they need to line up, but not in that moment. And so then therefore they go and do it. And then the teacher gets upset because they're not following the, preconceived rule that's set out. So now that's showing as poor executive functioning because they're not able to follow instructions. On the flip of that, that cognitive flexibility. So having a routine, that's great. In the classroom, you need a routine, but sometimes routines change. And so not being able to know that gym is after reading time. Well, guess what? The gym teacher's away that day and now you can't go to gym. So instead of reading time, we're going to the library for some extra time. Students who struggle with that cognitive flexibility, whether they're on the spectrum, off the spectrum, or just have a struggle with it, will struggle with that task. It will be a really big problem. And that can happen at home, right? As simple as you said we were going to go to Costco for free samples on Saturday. Well, then you have a flat tire. So you as a parent are now dealing with the stress of a flat tire and then an upset kid who really likes the Costco samples because you now can't go to Costco, right? It's a simple thing. You could say we're going to go to Costco on Sunday, but that's not what you said, right? So a parent who has a child who's struggling with that cognitive flexibility probably hears quite regularly, well, that's not what you said, or that's not what we were going to do, because until you start to learn strategies to deal with that because of that cognitive flexibility. So it's really those little things of day-to-day tasks where when it starts to seep into some of the school things, and then you're also seeing it at home, is really where you need to start working through that and strategies with the kids.
So let's talk about meltdowns in homework.
Hmm.
So, meltdowns in homework, quite often, when we're looking at it from just one lens, we can look at that homework and we can say, oh, well, this child should be able to do this, or I know how to do this. It's simple. You just answer the question, 2 times 3, just do this and do this. And there's meltdowns. Can you help a parent that's listening maybe understand how that's not simple for that child, even if the child is good at multiplication? So
Right.
let's say they're good at multiplication, but they're struggling to do their homework.
So there's layers to that, right? So we'll use a grade 3 kid as an example. Just because that kid's in grade 3 and that's grade 3 curriculum does not mean that it's easy for them, that they should be able to do that. Just because the teacher is sending home that grade 3 curriculum doesn't mean they should be able to do it, because maybe they're not at grade 3 level with multiplication. Maybe they were at grade 2 level, but they haven't done grade 3. Maybe this is the first year they've been given homework. Unpopular opinion sometimes, I don't love homework. I don't think it is, well, I know it is not necessary to make a child smarter. The flip side of that is I do believe in the action of taking some time to sit down and create a level of discipline to complete a task. So the homework in that regard comes in really handy, in that idea of we're going to sit down, we're going to do 15 minutes of a task. And maybe it's not multiplication in that moment, right? If you're noticing that your kid is really struggling with sitting down and doing the actual homework of multiplication, don't do it. Don't do it. Do something else. Maybe that 15 minutes is reading. Maybe it's something else. Yes, they didn't finish their multiplication homework. They will not fail grade 3. I promise you, they will not fail grade 3, but build it into other things. So maybe now you're having that kid help you with dinner and you go, ah, we got 4 people in our family and we need everybody wants 2 chicken legs. How many chicken legs do you think we're going to need? What do you think? They might not know. And then after they're able to answer the question, then you're like, oh, that's multiplication. You did that, right? That's 4 times 2, and build it in differently because they create an anxiety sometimes in themselves. And while that word is overused in this situation, I think it is merited that they create this anxiety around, I can't do it. And then they're harder on themselves. And then mom is trying to make me do this. And then there's feeling a level of disappointment. So sometimes I just think the step away from the actual task is important. The discipline of sitting and doing something for that 15 minutes, if that's the expectation, is what needs to happen. But they are not going to become a genius on multiplication because they did 15 minutes of their homework on Tuesday. And then you guys got in a fight because they hated it.
Something you touched on as well is that academic level, right?
Mm.
Like as adults, we go and everybody that we meet knows different things, has different interests, has different ways that their brain learns how to do things.
Yeah.
And I find it so fascinating that in the system, I love how you did distinguish between the teachers and the system, that
Yeah.
in the system, because the teachers can tell you that it's not, that in this system, we are being forced to believe that every child should learn the same, be at the same level, and do the same things as another child. And that I think needs to just be tossed out the window. And we need to completely change the way that that is structured completely, because these kids and their confidence. Another thing that you did say as well is with this math too. So with my son is brilliant in math, but can't get the answers on paper. So you can also have that other flip side as well, not where they're actually where the academic struggle is the issue. It's as we're going to into those executive functioning pieces where more than one instruction at a time, part of the verbal working memory, part of the perception, part of the inhibition, all of these different executive functioning pieces for him stop him from being able to actually get it on paper, even though if you verbally ask him, the answers are all there. You just can't break it down.
And I will just add to that with the schools and wanting to do things the one way. I will say they are making adjustments on how to differentiate some of that learning.
Mhm.
And so it's not through lack of wanting and trying. And I will say that even when the current, I don't know if we're still calling it new math, but it is, still new math. And now a lot of the ways they'll say, okay, we'll show 4 different ways how 3 times 2 is 6. That's great in theory because now you're having the kids learn 4 different ways. But then when they go to test on it, they're requiring a student to use number 2 for this question. But if that kid is comfortable using method number 1 and they still get 6, they shouldn't lose marks for using method 2, and they shouldn't lose marks for not being able to show level like this number 2 because they've already chosen the one kind that works for them. So I do have a challenge with that part of the system and the way the curriculum is expected to be taught, because if you already have something that works, it's great that you had exposure to the other ways, but this way works. So that is a bit of a challenge for me. And again, like with IEPs and them being fluid, and again, depending on the teacher you've got, they can really be effective in using your son as an example. Like if he can't get the idea on paper, being able to verbalize it and maybe someone is scribing. Or there's the computer option where I'm not always a huge advocate of that, but as a tool, I think it can be helpful. So yeah, I just think that there is some growth happening. It's just a matter of whether it will grow to the extent that the kids need it. Unfortunately, I'm not confident that will occur.
I've learned all my executive functioning was through Tara Sumner, who is an SLP, and she is unbelievable. And I know she's booked in 2024. She was booked up until 2026 and speaking to schools. There are some schools that have hired her to like totally teach all of her teachers executive functioning. And her goal is to get it in every school in her lifetime, which she's like, I don't think this is possible, but it's the goal she's going for, that once we can start mixing the academic with the executive functioning, then teachers will be able to really do what they're not able to because the way the system is telling them that they have to do things currently.
Right.
So it makes that difference. Absolutely. All right. So diving into, I know that you have talked to about, you have an assessment that is for academic as well as for the cognitive piece.
Mhm.
So can you tell us a little more about that? Like, how do we understand that? Like, why do you have a test for this to start off with?
Yeah, so the founder of Oxford founded, Oxford like 41 years ago, Dr. Nick Whitehead, and he was like, we need to make sure we're understanding the whole child in order for the help them reach their potential. And so initially it started with the Detroit, which is one of the cognitive tests that we did use. And with the times we've since shifted that over, but we're the only licensed learning center to do cognitive testing outside of psychologists. So there's quite a lot of extensive training that goes into it. And right now we use the KBIT and the Beery, and we're finding out how they learn. So, are they more visual? Are they auditory? What's their problem solving and focus ability? What's that vocabulary knowledge that they have, both from with a stimulus, so showing with pictures and giving words, but then also what can you pull out of your head when I'm asking questions about vocabulary? So, just kind of measuring it from all angles and then academically looking at where they are and then using those together to create a program for the kids. And so, I give examples to parents when they call asking about the assessment, just being like, when you go to a mechanic or even a doctor, they're not like, just do what you need to my car, just make it better, right? Make me better, cut me open, fix what you need to fix without any kind of tests and figuring out what it is. It doesn't make any sense to me. The academics, just doing the academics, it'll give you an academic level. Of course it will. But are you really watching how that child responds when they see that math question put in front of them, right? Is their heart increasing? Are they really trying, like pushing it away? Are they having to use their fingers? Like our assessment is dynamic because we're paying attention to the cues. And when you're looking at that visual side of things or that fine motor, is there a challenge with the way they hold their pencil? Can they actually stay in the lines for something? How is that then transitioning into schoolwork? Can they write their name? Are they using all capitals in their name? I see kids at 11 and 12 years old using all capitals in their names still. And sometimes it's pencil grip, sometimes it's a fine motor issue itself, sometimes it's a visual memory, working memory, what that looks like. And so I need to know that and see that first. So we're not, wasting class time just discovering this kid, and it is a service that's getting paid for. So I don't want to waste people's money or the kids' time and hurt their confidence more. So the assessment itself, I'm going to find out looking at their confidence, right? And if I can tell that they're maybe a little lacking in confidence, but they're maybe scoring at an academic level, I might start them a half step down so that I can build their confidence a little bit more when they're coming for classes, so that they can feel great about the academics that they're doing. So many kids don't feel that. And so we want to make sure we're building that. I mean, even those kids that come to us for enrichment, right? I'm finding out how they learn. I'm finding out what can I tweak to challenge them? And what is that one area that is still maybe not as strong as some of those other skills that are enriched? How can I build that up further to kind of be at the same level of those other skill sets? So there's always room for improvement, but understanding how they process that information is that first step to truly understanding them.
The thing too is when you're solely testing the academic one way, if
Hmm.
that child really struggles in that one way, they're not going to do well, that you're still not even going to get that child's academic level
Hmm.
until you start seeing how does their brain work. Like with my son, if you ask him verbally for everything, you will get this ridiculously high academic level, but if you test him with pen and paper,
Hmm.
he won't pass. And
Right.
it'll be tears, it'll be frustration. He will be diagnosed with a learning disability, right?
Right.
Which he was. We did actually a paid psychoed eval,
Right.
and they tested him with, it was a learning disability and written written
Graphic.
expression.
Yeah.
And he was diagnosed with dysgraphia.
Hmm.
And the thing is through learning through Tara Sumner, dyslexia, dysgraphia is all executive functioning. That once you start learning and building the executive functioning skills, so I did no writing work with him on paper, none. And all of a sudden he typed, so it was still, he struggled with typing and writing, a 2-chapter story that I thought he copied, perfect
Hmm.
grammar, punctuation, everything. Like, where did you get this? It was in his Google Drive. And he's like, oh, I wrote that. I'm like, what? Because you were diagnosed with a learning disability
Hmm.
because the testing was done in a format that his brain didn't work.
Right.
And then also because I was working not on his writing, but I was working on the executive functioning pieces that were making part of the writing by hand, the part of the brain that came to the paper. I was helping him with that piece, not even through writing, just through actually outside skills. Like you were saying, everything goes into moods, behaviors, reactions, being able to pause and stop and think. He was
Yeah.
never pausing and stopping and thinking to put in capitals or grammar or any of those things.
Yeah, and at home, I think, and focusing on those things is great. I think at school, like they need a lot of that too. So, and when you're putting them in a bigger group, and you had the luxury of not having of being able to have him at home. And so a lot of that is like when they're with us too, we're focusing on that executive functioning, but we are putting that pencil to paper still, but we're doing it in such a way that is manageable for them so that they can move forward, right? So we're doing some chunking. Tell me what you're thinking before you write it down.
Mhm.
Okay, that sounds great. Now let's put that down. Great. Now you've got it down. Now what do we need to do next? So now let's take the time, let's edit it. Let's teach you how to do it step by step. Whereas perhaps at school, it's kind of all one big chunk. Here's a list, do this. Now we're moving on. And it's overwhelming. It's
Yeah,
overwhelming for the best of us. So
absolutely.
focusing on that executive functioning stuff at home and not stressing so much even about that writing task. If writing is inherently hard, sometimes pulling a third party in to kind of build that too, then again everybody's working together to help them move forward, like how you guys were working with Tara. So it's kind of using an alternative resource, because I think parents should be allowed to parent and educators can educate if you have that luxury to be able to do that, so that sometimes parents can't teach their kids academics, because I know I could never work with my mom. It was a lot of this. I could do it with my dad, but I couldn't do it with my mom, and neither of my sisters could work with either of our parents. So it was sometimes it just doesn't work that way. So using a third party or stepping outside the house to do it. So I know my dad and I sometimes would go to the library together to be able to just, that's a separate space where we would work on academics, as opposed to at the dining room table where it would not happen in such a nice fashion. So
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't actually think you know this, like I homeschool my kids.
I did know that. That's why I was like, you have the luxury of taking them out and being
Yeah.
able to work with them, but not everybody can work with their
Yeah.
kids. Like, it
And the
just doesn't
thing
work.
though too is I still run a business, right?
Oh,
I'm still
yeah.
working. They do their stuff and being the mom as well. So there was a situation last week with my one son where he's struggling with initiation on a lot of different things. And even though I teach this and I
Mhm.
know this, I wanted to skip to the top step because in my mind, I'm like, well, I know how to do this. Let's just skip it and let's just move on.
Mhm.
And he was just hitting walls. And it was just this whole thing. And I'm like, because your lens from a parent too at times is
Mhm.
so different from, I'm like, okay, how would I do this if I was working with a client? And I had to actually stop and take myself out of that and be like, how would I do this?
Yeah.
And go, okay, I need to treat him like a client, not like my son. And you have,
Yeah, it would be hard.
it's hard. It's
I urge a lot of parents too to be like, you have to consider how you went through school too, right? If you insist on being the parent to work with your kids, but you are the engineer who never struggled with math,
Mhm.
you have a kid who is struggling with math, you might not be the parent if you don't have the patience or understanding that math can be challenging for people, right? When I hire a lot of my math teachers, especially those high school math, like they have degrees in some kind of mathematics, but one of those hiring questions is, tell me about math and science for you. Tell me about school. Did you ever struggle? When did you struggle? Because if you cannot understand a struggle and describe to me how you worked through it, how are you going to help a student who is struggling?
Yeah,
I can teach you lots of things on how to work with students, but I really take the time to curate good staff. And a lot of that is if you haven't struggled, you might not be the right fit for me at my center.
absolutely. And I will say as well that even though I have the training and have the knowledge, my one son, there are some things that I still have not touched at all because I'm like, oh, you know,
Why open up that can of worms sometimes, right?
right? I'm like, do I have the time and energy and bandwidth? And I know that I have to
Mhm.
do this consistently. And I know that I have to, and he's going to yell at me because it's
Mhm.
me, like, so I really haven't. I
Mhm.
know it's a struggle. That's where it is. Like, okay, yeah, maybe I should be reaching out to you. Right. Like it's just one of these things where it's like he does need something else to be helping him with that,
Yeah.
because it's that one part where I'm like, but I do feel it's important as well for the parent to understand it enough to then know who to get help with.
Yeah.
Because when I didn't know any of this before we did our psychoed eval, and there's stuff that there's different speak as well in order for them to know what the schools need from the academic side, but quite often they're still missing a lot of that executive functioning side, that
Yeah.
they did miss a lot of things in my son that are super important. And she just told me too that black and white thinking is just what he's like, and that's how it's just always going to have to be. And I'm like, no, because this is like affecting everything in his life. It's affecting his ability to have friends. It's affecting his ability to do sports and to try anything new. It's affecting his life to such a degree that he cannot live. He can't, it's not healthy. He's going down a negative road because of that. And she's like, well, that's something you can't change. And so these are the things where a parent needs to understand sometimes too, like really dive into understanding this a little bit more to know who to hire to help.
Yeah. And I would, that black and white thinking is something we deal with quite often. And especially if kids have come from sort of other institutions where it is very right or wrong. And okay, one could argue 2 times 4, it is 8. We know that. But if you had to show your work and you have to draw me some pictures, and then I could tell that you knew that that was 4 groups of 2, but you just counted those groups of 2 incorrectly and gave me 9 because you did pictures and you counted incorrectly, I can give you part marks. Your whole question isn't incorrect. But why did you get 9 instead of 8? Maybe you have a visual memory weakness and sometimes you don't see everything visually and you made a little mistake. So then we would teach you a strategy. Maybe you're putting a color in each circle as you count them to then make sure that you get 8, right? Whereas somewhere else might be like, oh, you didn't get 8. You're wrong.
Yes.
I'm going to say, and so with that black and white thinking, you actually can shift because those synapses in your brain, they are constantly firing and there's some change. But again, it's not going to happen overnight. And it's not going to all of a sudden, you're not going to be a middle of the road thinker. But instead of going, oh, I completely got this wrong, I'm bad at math, you go, oh, I got this part wrong, but this part I got correct. So even when we're correcting and working with the kids at the center is, you know what? This part you did really great on. This part I'd like you to recount. Let's look at this again, right? So even just our word choice to help them feel some success in some areas and then being able to go back to it again has really shown some increase in confidence and just a shift in some of that thinking around, because some kids, when we get them to edit, right, we have them use a colored pencil. And then I've got the other ones that are still using their pencil to erase their work and not using the colored pencil because they're so fearful of seeing a mistake. And I'm like, no. Let's use your colored pencil. And then now let's go back and look and see. And we talk about how that colored pencil switches something on in our brain that goes, oh, I made that little mistake here. And next time I'm going to try to catch it. So doing different things. Now, they might make that mistake 17 times before it finally switches, but it's the consistency and your word choice and the approach that I find slowly starts to shift some of that stuff where it's a little more manageable, right? Like some of the CBT stuff that happens, that cognitive behavioral therapy.
Yeah, absolutely. And with this kind of flexibility, they usually only have 2 files, right and wrong, good and bad. Mistakes are bad. Every single one is bad. There's not a good mistake. And helping them find that third bucket, that third file in their brain, and creating that new neural pathway of mistakes are learning, mistakes are growing. And I find too in school where testing is at the end, and it's like you either did well or you didn't, and you're either good or you're bad, kind of, versus what I do with my kids in homeschooling is I'll be like, okay, let's do this test to see where we can work on. Where do we not need to focus that you're already, strong in, and where should we put our focus a little bit more? And so I keep reframing what a test is for them.
Which is great. And they're shifting that a little in the schools too, especially in some of the high schools within their math curriculum where they're doing spiraling, right? So they're kind of constantly reevaluating where they are and going, oh, okay, well, we know fraction, so we don't need to do a lot of heavy fraction unit right now. We're going to move on to this area. And then, so
Mhm.
kind of always bringing things back as opposed to doing this unit here and then this unit and then this unit, but then we're going to test on all 9 units here. So they've shifted it a little bit in some of the math courses. I don't remember if they're doing that in some of the other ones. I think it's not as necessary. If you're doing a novel study in English, you're that after the novel's done, you're going to reflect on it. So it's kind of all of those other subjects have sort of always kind of been like that, but math was definitely still back in the Stone Age when it came to that stuff. So,
Okay, so I have a question for parents where they have a child who is really struggling in a subject and they have learned now that it's just too much for their child to do. It really is. Either it's like say 15 minutes is their max of what they can do, but it's like 30, 40, 45 an hour,
Mhm.
or it's just that it's academically too hard or the way it's being asked is too hard. And how do you help support a parent in navigating the classroom, the teachers, the expectations in that versus what the child is capable of to help the child with their confidence and building up the skills to get there when they're not there yet?
Yeah, so first for us, if a parent's calling me around that, it would be like, let's actually find out what their academic level is. So I would have them coming in and doing the assessment, figuring that out. Their Oxford programming would be based off of where their level is. So at that point, it's closing. If there is a gap, then we're going to be working on those basics to close the gap so that eventually we're now taking those skills and being able to apply them to the schoolwork independently. It might not happen in that moment, right? And I think that there's a phrasing called the difference between that gap and the gain, and the parents need to kind of understand that that gap might be bigger for a while. And if, again, like I mentioned earlier, if the homework is too hard, don't do it. And then that conversation is talking to the teacher and maybe seeing, we do school contact as well, so this is what we're doing at Oxford. What can we do at the school level even for the parents at home? So instead of sending home 12 questions, maybe they only need to do 3, right? And the goal is 3. And if they get 4 done, then that's a confidence booster, right? Because we're still now mirroring what was done in class with the homework and reinforcing the concept. So the reinforcement of the concept and the discipline of sitting and completing something is the point of homework, right? Proper homework. It's the point of that. And so if that's what they're able to do, then that's great. But then now you have the parent, Oxford, and the teacher all on the same page. When you don't have a teacher that's on the same page, that can be challenging. And then what I've had to do sometimes with the parent is we just have to sit there and go, well, what's the best recourse for Andi, right? How is she going to feel successful? And how are you as parents going to be able to adjust your expectations so that there's success there? So ideally everybody's on the same page. Sometimes they're not. And then you have to do, at the end of the day, everybody does want what's best for the kid. And so you have to make those adjustments accordingly.
And sometimes too, like we're so conditioned that it has to be the highest mark possible. What if we can change that framing in our brain of let's let this child get 50s, 60s, whatever it is, whatever the mark the teacher's giving them in that grade for this moment
Mhm.
while they're learning the stuff at Oxford, and teach the child that that is okay because the school is not meeting them where they need. And then as they start boosting up and their grades start going up, the 50s and 60s or whatever that child is getting, because that's where we are acknowledging that that child is truly at in their capabilities and what they're doing. And that's okay, instead of that being a punishment or a negative. And we're working on the skills of, hey, if they now get a 60,
Mhm.
hey, congratulations, and up to the 65, and seeing where they can get
Yeah.
to where they're like passing and able to do it throughout that school year or even the year following, as
Yeah.
long as we're seeing that slow upward trajectory of maybe 1%, even with that child as they're going up through time until they get to a level that is at that grade level where the child is confident and comfortable
Right.
and able to do it on their own. Mhm.
Yeah, and I would build on that by saying I think yes, we're focused on the marks, but we're never focused on why the mark.
Yes.
So, okay, your kid has a C. Why? Why do they have a C in
Mhm.
French, let's say? Is it because they are truly struggling with the French language? Is it because they're struggling sitting in their seat? Is it because their English is also behind and then now they're struggling with French, which is often the case? Are they in French immersion but are ESL and haven't mastered English yet? That is a huge challenge for a lot of kids, and people believe that we are a bilingual country and we're not. And so they are encouraged to put the kids in French immersion. And I'm bilingual, so I love that I have French, but it's not for everybody. And if you're not strong in your first language and then your second language, how is your third language going to be strong? So it's also just understanding like, you know what? I get everybody wants their kid to have opportunities and be better than they were. I don't think anybody is sitting there going, "Ah, I wish my kid was worse than me." Nobody's doing that. And so I get we want to provide opportunities and extracurriculars and all of those things. But like you said, if your kid is not an A student, a B is their potential and a B plus is their potential, you can do great things with the B plus. A B of today is the A of 20 years ago. So a B means that you are understanding what is happening and you are where you need to be. Is there potential for growth? Of course there is. There's potential to strive for all those other things. But if you're hitting a B, most teachers are going to be like, you know what, that's pretty good. That's pretty good. And that gives you, that opens up your avenue going forward as you go into high school to give you those opportunities of, oh, I could probably do academic level. I might have to push a little harder, but I could do that level. And it just keeps your options open. But I do think we're a little too focused on that. Nobody has asked me in quite a long time what my English mark was in grade 6.
Yes, I say that all the time. I don't even know what my marks were. Like, I don't remember them.
I mean, I do know them, but I didn't, but nobody's asked me in a long time.
It's fascinating because I actually found a whole bunch of my elementary report cards.
Yeah.
And I was
Here.
going through them. You have yours there? Yeah.
Yeah, they're down there.
I was going through them and it kept saying I was a voracious reader.
Mm-hmm.
And then it was talking about something else, though, about my writing work. And now that I know, I'm like, this was verbal working memory.
Mm-hmm.
Like they talked about how much I loved learning and loved asking questions and loved doing these things, but I struggled with this one piece in every single report card.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, that's verbal working memory.
Right.
Things too with these kids, when that, like with languages, as you were saying with French, right? If they're verbal working memory or their nonverbal working memory, if either of them is struggling, they're going to struggle with languages.
Mm-hmm.
Like and it doesn't matter. Like they could be strong in one, but if the other one's struggling, the languages are still going to be hard for them in one way or in another. Yeah. And we have to look and think about why, exactly as you said, why are they at a C?
Mm-hmm.
What is that?
And why do you need them to be at an A plus?
Yes.
That's the other part. Why do you need them to be at an A plus? Now, granted, our post-secondary system is very grade focused. And so you need to get to that place come high school. But grade 6, grade 3, it's awareness. Mm-hmm. So that's an awareness at, okay, you were at a C. Why are you here? Okay, now I know why you're here. How are we now going to get you to there? And I think that's the biggest thing is I think instead of understanding why at first, parents automatically will hire a tutor to come to their house and then they're just helping them work on their homework, which isn't helping them get to there. You have to find out why first.
Yes.
If you don't like sitting and getting their work done, nobody loves to do extra stuff. But there's also a reason why they might not like to do it, right? Because if it was easy, most kids will sit down and have the discipline and pound it out, get it done in 15 minutes and move forward. But if it's a naturally challenging for them, right? Like how many times you've been like, oh, this is really hard. I want to do it. Not me. I can tell you, not me. How long I put off my accounting? Like it's hard. I don't want to. So it's the same. Why are kids any different? It's the same when you talk about like we're allowed to have bad days as adults. We're allowed to say like, oh, I didn't sleep well, I didn't do this, and you're kind of miserable, and maybe you warn everybody else around you. But the 3-year-old who's struggling with their emotions that day can't be sad, can't get mad, and maybe they lash out and hit a friend or take a toy, and that's so bad. Of course, it's not great behavior, but they're allowed to feel their feelings. And I think we forget that because there's an expectation that we don't allow the grace when they don't meet it in the moment, whether it be about behavior, marks, everything. It's again, finding out why and helping them work through it. They are still learning. We have to teach them. We have to teach them how to process their emotions, how to work through those hard feelings when it comes to failure, mistakes, and how to get better. Learning skills are not they're not part of a lot of the school curriculum. You have to learn. Focus is a learned skill. It's a learned skill. Yes, I understand they can sit and stare at their iPad for an hour, but what does that look like when it comes to doing a task? Because now you're bringing in more brain power and working memory and fine motor. And so we have to teach them how to do those things. And I just think that why has been lost.
Yeah.
And I deal with it every day when we're working with the kids, finding out their why, which is why I like what I do so much, because I have a starting point that's realistic, that parents can see when you explain it to them.
Yeah, no, so much with that. And yeah, with my kids, so they're grades 6 and 8. And I have not been focusing on the academic this year. It's been all on, especially with my grade 8, starting tasks,
Hmm.
preferred versus non-preferred, because he did all his preferred subjects. He will do something that's worth 5% of a mark over something that's 60% because he likes to do it versus what needs to be done. He gets overwhelmed in starting a task, thinks that it's going to be so big. The planning piece is tough for him. That we've been working on that. That I'm like, if we could spend this year working on that, that
Hmm.
you will know how to organize your own courses, because he picks his courses. We organize what he's going to do each week, how he's going to do it, how he's going to get it done. If he learns all of those skills and learning how to do the stuff he doesn't want to get done and doing it once he gets to high school, that would have done him in. As easy as the academic part is for him, he would have struggled getting assignments done, getting them handed in, the pressure and stress on him. That I'm like, let's focus on this piece this
Hmm.
year and help you with this, because that is going to help you in high school. That's going to help you in college with
Yeah.
any of the academics you're going to learn.
Yeah, which is great.
Yeah. And something else you said as well is there seems to be this change in what we expect of adult behavior versus what we expect of child behavior.
Hmm.
And as adults, we struggle with subjects. We struggle with courses that we're learning in our jobs. We struggle with our moods. We struggle with regulating ourselves every single day. So it's fascinating that we expect our kids shouldn't.
Yeah.
And instead of going in and teaching them, oh yeah, we do this too. My one son knows if he's some certain weather sometimes give him a headache.
Right.
And I'll come downstairs sometimes and he's like, I just laid on the couch for an hour. He goes, because I had a headache and I did some breathing and I made sure I ate and I had my water, I drank and stuff, and I still have a headache. And we'll be like,
Yeah.
okay, what do you feel like? Do you feel that you have the brain and the focus that you can work right now? Or do you want to move that to tomorrow when you have a bigger brain? And sometimes he'll say, I can do it today. I think that helped me. And other days he'll be like, no, I need to push it. I'll move it to tomorrow. And he will. And
Yeah.
he'll get it done. But he's learning how to take care of himself when he really needs to.
Hmm.
And when we do have to do things, he knows what to do to help to try to push through it, even if he's
Hmm.
not feeling so great, but then what to do to recover after.
And I think that's important because, again, it's that self-reflection, self-awareness, right? So even when kids are coming for their hour after school, take into consideration, a how was your day question is a very big question for some kids,
Big. Yes.
right? So it could be was there anything that happened today that made you feel great? Was there anything today that made happen that made you feel not so great? Because if they can pinpoint that one thing, well, my teachers will ask those questions. That's going to give you an indication of what is this next hour going to be like. If you had a moment where, Joanna was pushing you and you couldn't get your work done because she was bugging you and you're caught up in that feeling, it's okay. Well, you know what? I'm really sorry to hear that. Joanna's not here for this hour, so that's really fantastic. We can get some great work done today. I see that you made a bit of a face when I put this particular book in front of you. Would you think you'd like to choose which book you want to start with today? Would you like to work on some phonics? Would you like to do some reading? Right? Allowing a little bit of that autonomy, still having to do your work, but allowing some autonomy for where you want to start. Do you feel like you need a little bit of a break today? 2 to 3 minutes. Let's take a break. Would you like to do A, B, or C? Right. So, again, giving them some strategies and giving them a little bit of rope, but the expectation is still that stuff needs to get done.
Mhm.
Right. So, at home, being that you're homeschooling them, that's great. Okay, great. You've now chosen some self regulation and you've got the flexibility to say, oh, are you going to do that tomorrow? But he understands the expectation is still there to have to complete those tasks. So it's a great skill. Whereas at school, it's kind of like, okay, let's everybody line up. Oh, sorry, you're having a bad day, but Let's move on. Oh, your sister hit you this morning? Yeah, that's really hard sometimes. Pick out your pencils. We're going on to science. And not for lack of wanting to know how the kid's day was going. They just don't necessarily have the space to do it because there's an expectation.
Yeah, and the time, like it's
Yeah. And then so teaching that to them, whether it be at Oxford, whether it be at home, and helping kind of work that together so that they can eventually then take that skill set to school.
absolutely,
That helps
absolutely
the teachers.
amazing. Yeah. Allie, we could go on. I'm sure there's so much we could talk about with this. So, if there's one more thing that you feel that parents that are listening to this need to know that we haven't talked about, what would that be?
I just think that the bigger messaging around giving your kids some grace when it comes to how they're feeling about stuff. But if you feel that something is off with school and that they might need some support, I would urge you to not wait. Just to get an assessment, to go and talk to a professional in that moment is going to give you information that then you can make an educated decision around, as opposed to just waiting for that piece of paper in February when that report card comes home, but the marks had to be submitted in January. And you may have not been able to talk to the teacher until late February. And now we've let 2 months go by where you were maybe kind of feeling that before Christmas, anyways. So they do say that kids who do not get any help, if they're falling behind in grade one and they never get help, will never fully catch up.
Mm.
So it's a bit of a scary statistic, but there's a lot of research around it and several peer-reviewed studies. And that is just something that I'm like, just if you're feeling like you need the support, don't wait. Because I think I hear so many parents when they come in my office going, oh, I wish I had done this sooner. I wish I had done this sooner. I don't think you'll ever regret doing it sooner, but that regret does come if you leave it. So
Yeah, no, that's so important because we do. We are conditioned to just keep pushing. That's
mhm.
our societal norm now. And so,
Keep pushing, but get some support while you do it.
right, exactly. All right. So you have mentioned this assessment.
Hmm.
Can people get this? How do they get it? How does that work with you?
Yeah, so we typically charge for it. It ranges between two and like 275, depending on where you kind of are in the country and cost of living. But I'd be willing to offer it for no charge at Oxford Waterloo. They can email me. So it's waterloo@oxfordlearning.com. So I would do that until the end of May.
So end of May, you're offering it for free to everybody?
Yeah.
Seriously? Wow. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
And they can be, is that Canada only
So it would be at my Waterloo location.
at Waterloo? Oh, so they come in and do it in
They
Waterloo.
would come in and
Okay.
do it in person. Yeah.
So
And
Waterloo, Ontario. Okay.
the other
Excellent.
thing that I'd love if I could mention to parents too, that you were mentioning that one other tidbit, so it's a second tidbit, is kids should not be idle for 9 weeks in the summer. Summer is such a time where you can be doing a little bit of academics. A 9 week break is great in theory, but then we're getting back to September and that's a review month. So now, you've got 13 weeks where you're really not doing a ton or reviewing the year before, where you can use that as a time to move ahead. So a couple of hours a week, you can get a lot done and a lot of headway, whether you're catching up or getting ahead or just kind of keeping that momentum going. Like I've seen kids jump grade levels with a couple hours a week with us in the summertime. It just makes such a difference and it makes the next school year easier so that the ultimate goal is for you not to need me forever. That is the goal. If you are still with me in 18 and you need me, that's a problem. I've not done my job properly. So I have kids who come to me in 18 because their reason for coming changes. They love the support, but they're no longer needing me per se. They're
Mhm.
using me in a way that makes sense for them.
Yeah.
So I just think it's the summer part of it is huge.
Yeah. And I always say it's nice to have somebody in your back pocket for when you need them. So all of a sudden, like you might be good, you might see you in elementary, and then middle school happens, and all of a sudden, homework's being thrown at you. You don't know how to organize it and do all these things. You can go for that stage, and then you get it. And you're good for middle school, and then high school hits, and you're like, whoa, new stage. What's this? Same thing with college,
Yeah.
right? Every stage to have you in the back pocket.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've had students who've done both, right? I've had kids who have been with me from 3 years old until 18, and their reason for being with us changed, but they stayed with us the whole time. He's been
Yep.
with me at Oxford 6 months shy of my career, left for a couple years in university, but is now one of my teachers.
Um,
So it's actually like a full circle thing, which is kind of cool. but just your reason changes. And then I have others who, like you said, come back and forth after a couple years, different stages in their education, and then it works for them as well.
And that's what I say too, like in my support circle membership, it's like step off when you feel you've gotten to what you need at the moment, step out and then come back in when your child gets to another stage and you need like more support and going into things at that next level, because it's always this change through time, and having that person in your back pocket is just to know, okay, I can go back into this group, or I can go back to Oxford, or however it is, to be working with me or to be working with you, in order to be like, okay, I can go back because they know how to handle this next stage now too.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
All right. So I will put your email in the show notes with the end date of May for anybody that wants to come to you in Waterloo for that free assessment. They can follow you on social. We have all of your links that I will be putting into the show notes so that everybody can find you. Everybody go check out everything that Allie's doing. This is absolutely amazing. It's hard for me to find somebody that does work with executive functioning where I work with it. Like, so much of the executive functioning coaches I mean, like, don't go to these depths and really understand skills in those depths.
Yeah, and I'd say, like, I'm happy to have people come to Waterloo, but like there are Oxford Learnings all over Canada. We're a Canadian company, so that's important these days, right? We do operate in the US as well, just under a different name, but it is Canadian. We work with Canadian curriculum. It's huge, but all Oxfords operate with that cognitive learning side of things.
So we do have American listeners as well. So may I ask what the US is?
Yeah, it's called Great Power.
Great Power. Okay, so they can, anyone that's in the States. But
Yeah.
can they work with somebody in Canada? Oh, it's different. Would it be different?
Could if there's virtual. Yeah, they could do the virtual side of things too. There's a bunch of centers in Canada that do the virtual. I have had the virtual before. I currently don't. I would bring it back if people were interested. I haven't had enough interest at one time to bring it back fully, but I have other colleagues who I can recommend if there was only like one person interested. I'm happy to refer to them to other centers too.
Amazing. Amazing. All right. Thank you so much, Allie. And I'm so excited for everybody to listen to this.
Yeah, it would be great. Thank you.
All right. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for listening. If you have any questions for Allie, you can go to the show notes and contact her directly. If you have any questions for me, all of my links are in the show notes. And if you would like to join my support circle, the link for that is also in the show notes. And I will see you in the next episode.